Good evening and welcome to the October 29th meeting of the Goffstown Budget Committee. Scott, do we need to start off with a roll call or the reading of the language first?
Your call. You can go roll call first.
Great. So I'll start with roll call. Skylar Sund.
Present and alone.
Bill Cordis. I don't see him in. Greg Flegel.
Yes, I'm here and alone.
Joe.
Present and currently alone.
Eileen. I haven't seen her log in yet. Jeff O'Brien.
Present and alone.
Fred Platt.
Present and alone.
Dennis, I do not see logged in. I am here. I am by myself. Spencer Diaz. Do not see logged in. Richard Manzo.
Present and alone.
Richard Fletcher. It doesn't look like we've figured out Richard's audio issues yet. Jared Talbot.
School board's present and alone.
In Selectman LeMay.
Here, present. I'm alone in the room.
All right. Thank you all. Scott, if you would read the language for virtual meetings.
Sure. Consistent with Governor Sununu's Executive Order 2020-04, Emergency Order Number 12, Budget Committee members will be attending the meeting remotely. The public can access this remote meeting by either viewing it via live stream link on the GTV website or by calling into a telephone conference bridge line at area code 603-766-5646. Then you'll enter participant code 685562. If you wish to make a public comment at the beginning of the meeting, please wait for the chair's instructions and then press *9. Your microphone will be unmuted and you'll be directed to state your name and address prior to making a public comment. And I can let you know if we have anyone on that line. And we do not.
All right. So we'll move past that. All right. So first time for some of us doing any deliberations, and first time for all of us doing virtual deliberations. So Scott, I'm not sure if there's anywhere you wanted to start out. But
yeah, I was speaking with Jared over the last couple of days, and I thought that we would just go quickly over the, that overview page that was provided to you. And then, from there we can just, I can bring up the budget, and typically, as in the past, the budget committee starts on the district lines. And then as you go through each page, questions are asked by budget committee members, and then the school board rep or myself would respond. And that's kind of how we take it. If there were instances in which budget committee members wish to make a motion to amend the lines, then they would make that motion, get it seconded, and then there's obviously discussion and stuff. So so if it's okay with you, I'll bring up the overview page on my screen, and then I'll kind of share that with everybody, and we'll take it from there. And Jared, if you would just feel free to interrupt and add as you go. So let me just share. All right, I just want to acknowledge that I'm going to make it a tad larger. Hoping to. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Yes.
good to hear.
So in going over this, and this was the same exact, it was slightly amended because the school board made some modest changes, but you'll see that we've got a current budget of general fund budget alone of $43,725,909. And the default budget that is being proposed is $45,384,100, and the difference between the default and the current year is about 1.65 million, and it's a as we mentioned during the presentation before both the school board and the budget committee, we saw an increase of a little over 3% from the New Hampshire retirement system. This was the same as Selectman LeMay knows, same thing that we're seeing on the town side.
Correct.
Really what we wanted to demonstrate here was that in terms of that default budget, about $718,000 of that default budget is that increase in the New Hampshire retirement system, and then the balance of that is without it. So it was one of those things where both the school and the town budgets are just to some extent hamstrung by this pretty substantial increase. The new spending, and again, this is monies that are above the default, is $130,014, and the lion's share of that is in what's called non-collective bargaining unit salary increases. We do have a 0.4 speech person, and we'll cover that as we go through the budgets. But we also, as you'll see when we go through this, the school board and the administration also made cuts to the budget, but the net result is $130,000 in new spending. And then this just kind of summarizes things. So as we go down, what I also wanted to share with you is that when we ultimately adopt a budget in terms of the school board, and they have done so, they have put forward to you a $47,763,105 proposed operating budget. That includes the general fund budget as well as the food service budget, which is self-sustaining, and then the special revenue fund budget. Those are your grants that you get from state and federal sources. So that's when we talk about gross numbers. Please keep in mind that that's a number that ultimately you would be voting on, that gross number. We will be covering the food service budget, and I did include that in your packet, and we'll cover that briefly. There's really almost no changes except for contractual obligations in there, along with a decrease in a computer line. So other than that, really no changes there. And then on the grants budget, the budget is always offset by revenues. So the $1 million in grant spending is offset by $1 million of grant revenue. So I wanted to let you know that. The thing that you'll hear from both school and town is, what is the impact on tax rates? And I have more. I gave you in your packet, I gave you some different scenarios on tax rates. I don't set the tax rate. The Department of Revenue does. I work with the town to give them the figures, but I wanted to share with you, and this is something that former Budget Committee Chair, now School Board Member Dan Cloutier used to do all the time, was that right now, we're looking at the town's valuation of all properties is $1.741 billion. And what that means is that in terms of the proposed tax impact on expenses only, not factoring any revenues, would be about $1. And you'll see that the difference between the proposed budget and the default budget is about an 8-cent difference. So I wanted to share that with you. Next thing that I wanted to go over was that revenue piece, and let me bring that up. Here we go. And I got to make this bigger. All right. Yeah, you should have that in front of you with and what you'll see, Mark and others, is that in 2019-20, that's the tax bill that we had gotten before, the school side of the tax rate was $13.28. All right. I had projected a tax rate based upon all the different changes to revenues and expenses as we closed out our books of about $13.49 just recently. The DRA, and Mark, you probably don't know this yet, but the DRA just called me yesterday and they work with the town. The school's tax rate is going to be 13.47, which was great because I don't know if you remember, but when I had initially projected it, I had projected it at $14, as high as $14.15. But because we got this money here, the parity aid from the state, which we didn't spend all of it, because we saw some savings in our budget due to COVID-19, and because we had unanticipated revenues, the good part is that it was, I guess, way overestimated. What you're looking at in these next two columns, which will be, I'm going to scoot up here. Hopefully I don't get anybody dizzy. Yes, sir.
Could I just, what was that number? I wasn't quite ready. It's 13 point what from the DRA?
Oh, it's going to be 13.47.
Okay, I got it. Thank you.
So, and I have it, and just for people's personal benefit here, let me see if so this current year, the total tax rate for the entire town, that's local school, state school, town, county, you name it, was $24.58. And newsbreaker is that, Mark, you'll hear on Monday that it's going to go to $24.89. So pretty good overall, both town and school. And the net was a 17-cent increase in the town side, a 19% increase on the school side, a 7-cent decrease on the state school side, and a 2-cent increase on the county side. So overall, I think pretty good news in that respect. Any questions on at least what we're seeing this year?
Do I have that sheet somewhere? I don't see it in the yellow folder.
You should have that.
Fred, it was on the back of the budget when we got the
Fred, if you don't, I emailed it to everybody as well. So I try to give a couple of different projections with regard to estimated revenues. And this is the one part of my job that I get super nervous about. And I say that because I try to project these revenues, but when there's changes at the state level or federal level, and we get either a lot more money, as in last year, or in some cases they pull a trick on us. They say, oh, by the way, you're not going to get $500,000. It's dangerous in a way, especially for me to put myself out there. But I think at the end of the day, we're probably going to be at this 1428 number. Might be a little less, might be a little bit more, but I think we're shooting for the budget that we proposed. It would be the tax rate. So you'd be looking at about a 70-cent increase, which was a little bit less than what I had projected last year. But again, I say that with caution in the sense that these are, as you can see here, I took $140,000 off of our state adequacy. I kept our SWEP the same, but the state, and Fred, you're a state rep, and so is Joe. I never know like what can happen here if they change the formula, if it's more or less. You just like last year, I remember reaching out to Joe saying, "Hey Joe, what's this number going to be for this parity aid?" It was a big thing. And, Senator D'Alessandra's office gave me one number. Then Joe gave me another. And to Joe's credit, he was closer. But that was something that came out of the blue, so that was a good thing. And we were able to take advantage of it. I don't suspect that we're going to be seeing that in the next biennium. But I share that with you. So please don't come yelling at me if these numbers are off, because I just don't know. I try to make my best educated guess on this stuff. So with that, I think the most important thing, for you guys to know is that, for every $100,000 of spending, you're looking at like 6-7 cents on, in terms of tax rate. And that's just on the expense side. And we try to manage the, the revenues as best we can. I take a pretty conservative approach on the revenue side. I'd rather, like last year, I'd rather project $14 and come in at, under 14 and a half to 13 and a half, then go the other way around. So, so that's really, a nutshell before we get started as to what the landscape looks like.
Great. Did anyone have any questions for Scott based off all that? All right.
So with
If-
your, Mr. Chair, with your permission, I'll bring up the budget itself. And now what I did for the sake of paper was everyone has this budget with actuals, all right? The chair and the vice chair in the past, I've always given them the notes as well, but because we're in COVID world, I sent it to you electronically, the notes piece. And so the chair, the vice chair, and the school board rep all have the notes. So if there are, and I have them. So if there's any specific questions about a particular line, you'd have that. And note here that this is something that I added after the last school board meeting, is I put in a reference line. Let me share my screen so you can see what I'm talking about. So as you can see here, to the far left, I put reference number, and for me, they coincide with an Excel spreadsheet. But this way, let's say that we're doing a discussion, and someone has a question about this particular line. You can say, oh, let's go to reference line number 626. It's a lot easier on page whatever. You follow? So I thought it would be, in light of the fact that we're all virtual, might make things a little bit easier.
Yep. So for starting off, Scott, I'm sorry, you said that only me and Jeff have the proposed budget with notes.
Paper copy, yes. Okay. Everybody has it electronically, and that's what we've done in the last couple of years. I've provided it to you. I always gave like 3 copies of it for the room. It's like 80. It's like 80 to 100 pages, that thing. So
Yeah, that's true.
Oh yeah, it's thick.
Double side. Double-sided, yep.
So do you want me to start with the actuals, and we'll go through those pages just so everyone can stay on the same page?
Yeah, I think that would make sense. And I apologize that this thing, I'm trying to see, hold on a second. How do I get this thing off to the far right? The search one? I don't know if let me just move it over here. There we go. All right. And I'll try to make this as large as I can without, there we go, without distorting anything. So this is, we're on page,
As a reminder, could you just give a articulation when we talk about location function accountant program? Because as we look at these, I know we're going to see probably, certain things under account title multiple times.
Yeah.
And the reason why we'll see those different segregations.
Okay. I'm trying to remember the color sheet that I gave you. I think it was a blue sheet that.
Yeah, it's a blue sheet.
Okay.
Yep.
So you have what's called a budget line for those of you who are relatively new, and it's a 14-digit or code. The first one, number 10, that is your general fund listing. So everything that we're going to be talking about tonight is fund number 10. That's your general fund. It's where all the money, for the most part, goes through. We also use what's called Fund 21. That'll be for your food service.
Mm-hmm.
And then Fund 22 is your general fund. We don't spend a ton of time on either of those because they're more or less self-sustaining. We focus on the budget committee, all the focus is really on the general fund. The next,
Scott,
yes, sir.
Oh, Scott, Fund 22 is special revenue. Is that
Correct.
right?
Special revenue,
Okay.
grants,
Okay.
special revenue, same, they're synonymous.
Gotcha. Thank you.
And just so you know that when I have it in, when I'm looking at my screen, I don't always know I can't see the people sometimes. So the next 3 digits is your location. So 000 is your district line. And we have Dick coming back in. So 000 is your district line, and that represents $9.5 to $10 million of this budget. I think it's really more the bigger ticket items, like most notable is transportation, special education, out of district placements, district personnel who don't necessarily reside in a particular school. The next,
Scott, a lot of our IT infrastructure also comes from this group, correct?
a lot of your IT infrastructure comes from the district line, correct? And the reason why there's a couple of reasons why, but what we found is that trying to budget in each school, because there's so much fluidity, that, you know, one year you'd overspend a lot in one school, underspend in another. It just made sense to put it in the district line so that it was easier to manage. What we do ultimately for state reports is we break the district line down by elementary, middle, and high school for state reporting, and it's all based upon student population. So the high school is about 40% of our student population. So 40% of district expenses get attributed to the high school, as an example.
One thing to note, and I think it's just bears repeating at the beginning of the meetings. You know, I know that the school board has made a concerted effort to migrate some of our items to the district lines from the individual school lines. So as you look at our actuals from prior years, they might look differently, and it's mostly because, you know, we have moved the items to those lines, and so the actuals would have been low in 2018. They might have increased in 2019. And if you do see anything like that, feel free to just, you know, bring it up as, why did we have such an increase from the prior year, year over year? And we can articulate, you know, there was movement, and there is a reduction in those lines from the school lines when we've moved it to the district.
Good point. The next four digits, so in this case, it's 1100. That's called your function lines. And this is how it must be reported to the Department of Education and the DRA. 1100 is your special education lines. And if you look at that, the cheat sheet, and I'm going to stop sharing for a second and show you. So you have this cheat sheet, and it'll
Right.
tell you, you know, that 1200 is special education. Things like speech is 2150, transportation is 2722 and 2721. The reason why they have this is that these are uniform codes, not just for New Hampshire, but across the United States for the most part. And what it does is it puts all of these school expenses in different buckets, and it allows for state and federal government to see how much monies school districts are spending on regular ed and special ed, on transportation, on athletics, you name it. So that's the function lines. The next three digits, that's what's called your program. And we use that to, most of them you're going to see are 18, but we do have different programs. And as you'll see on your cheat sheet as well, that you'll see it on supply lines a lot, where it's like, okay, those are math supplies, those are English supplies, those might be art or music, and it just further, you know, separates out where your monies are going. And then last but not least are your account lines. And the big one that I wanted to share with you folks on the budget committee is that all of the account lines that begin with 100, those are all your salary lines. So as you can see, I'm going to show you my screen. As you can see here, all of these right here are salary lines attributed to the 1100 function for the district. And then when you get to 200s, those are all of your benefit lines. And it goes from health insurance to dental to life insurance to FICA, you name it. And then after that, it goes into 300s, which are your contracted services, and on and on and on. So each account code and each series has a specific type purpose. And again, all of this, the reason why there's all these numbers is because I have to fill out a form every year. It's like a 35-page spreadsheet. And I have to break everything out into how much money did we spend in supplies for elementary, middle, and high? How much money did we spend on transportation? And we use all these codes to run those reports. So I wanted to touch upon one more thing, and Jared kind of alluded to it, is that you're going to see when you look at these columns here that there's going to be differences. And there's a story many times as to why. But as I mentioned in the presentation to the school board and to you folks a couple of weeks ago, last year's actuals, this 2020 actuals, they're funky because we moved monies around due to COVID. We didn't have certain expenses in one area, but let's say IT, we had a ton. 2020 actuals are going to be a bit wonky. And when you look at, I'll use one line in particular. This is the teacher substitute line. So we went from, almost 201,000, 296,000, 154, 155. We've kept the same budget as the current year, and actually it's been the same for the last 2 or 3. So we had a bit of an anomaly here, simply because we had a few teachers that were on leaves, maternity leaves actually. So we spiked a little bit here. We dropped here, but this was the same year that the school board, we were struggling to find subs, so they increased the pay if a sub worked, longer than a certain number of, I think 20 days or something, to try to entice more subs. So this line might go up in the future, but we held it steady for this particular budget season. So there's, as Jared alluded to, there's reasons why the numbers kind of go where they go. And that's just, ask us if you have any questions on any of those.
All right.
Excuse me.
Awesome. Thank you, Scott. Any questions there? Hearing none, would love to start going line by line here. I would also like to mark page 21 as our minimum of where I'd like to get to tonight. There's a good stopping point there. And that would get us about a third of the way through this, which I think would be nice, but we'll obviously feel out the temperature as we go through things here. Starting off big picture though, I think that the proposed budget is pretty close to the default. Obviously would love to do as much work as possible, but I think we're starting off in a good position there, at least in my opinion. So we'll start on page 1. Generally, if you have, for newer members, if you have a question about increase on the line, something like that, feel free to chime in. And then once everyone has asked all the questions were made, any proposals on that page, we'll move on. So we'll start with page 1, give everyone a few seconds to review lines. And if you have questions, just chime in.
Hey, Cole.
Yep, Joe.
This is Joe. So I want to actually talk about this teacher sub salary. So I was looking at, I understand last year the actuals were far less, and Scott explained that really well. But I'm looking at even the actuals this year, and it looks like we've only spent about 30K of that line this year, and it's like 3 months into the budget. So I guess I'm wondering, like, do we see us like completely spending the 270, or do you think we're going to fall like below that?
My gut feeling is, Joe, as you know, we are in a hybrid model with school, so we aren't using as many substitutes as we normally would. I do not anticipate us spending that full amount at this point in time. But again, I think it's due to just the life that we're living with the hybrid situation. Looking into the future, I believe that that's a level funded item that we would be spending on, especially since we did have to up the rate of our substitutes so that we could get talent to actually participate in the program.
Okay, so I'm going to make the first motion tonight, Cole, if that's cool.
Oh yeah.
I want to just cut that line by 70,000. So that's line 10001 1118 121, and cut it 70,000. So the base would be 200,000.
All right. Is there a second?
Seconded.
I'm sorry. Who was it?
That was Richard Manzo.
Great. Thank you. So motion from Joe, second from Richard Manzo to cut teacher sub salary line from 270,000 to 200. Discussion there.
I want to hear from Scott.
Typically the person who makes the motion explains why the motion is, and then the person who seconded it would also then get an opportunity. And then I think the school board rep or myself would then, I guess, make our pitch as to why we felt it was appropriate or not appropriate.
Yeah, that'd be great if I could explain that.
Yep, go for it, Jeff.
Yeah, we're just we're looking at, obviously, like people have lost their jobs in town, and there's a budget that we have, and I'm looking at any place that we can to be make responsible choices. And I'm even looking at 2018, and it's like around 200,000. We've only used about 30K as of this year, with one quarter already over. And I understand part of that's due to the hybrid model, but also we've needed less substitutes this year, even with the per diem increase. So I guess I'm just asking to, whenever we can, just kind of cut it down as much as possible, if we can.
Scott, I don't know if it's just me, but you're not sharing your screen anymore.
Yeah, I know that. I can share it again, but I was just trying to find out. I have the most recent expenditure report, and I can't do that with. So that's why I unshared it for now, while the discussion was taking place.
All right, Richard, did you have anything to add?
Yes, we need to budget for the times that we're in, not the times that we used to be in. As Joe said, people are out of work. People have priorities that they need to meet. We can't be pricing people out of their homes, especially not right now. We as a community, we need to make shared sacrifices, and this is just a starting point. It's something that I wish that we didn't have to do, but we need to make the best choices for our constituents.
All right, further discussion?
I have a question for Jared and Scott. Mrs. Schuyler, do you think that if we drop it to 200, that will cover you for FY22, that would be appropriate?
In my opinion, I think that it would not be appropriate. And I say that because we typically, in terms of spend, our teacher substitute lines, especially in the last 2-3 months of the year, historically is where you spend at least half of it. And the thing that is important to note here was that we increased the pay from to $100 a day to try to attract and retain teacher substitutes. And we're not talking about the year that we're in right now. If that were the case, I think I might even buy that argument. And in terms of, would 200,000 be ample for this current year? It very well may be, but we're not talking about this year. We're talking about FY22. We're talking hopefully normal situations where historically we have spent anywhere from $250,000 to $300,000 on teacher substitutes. So in that respect, that's why I don't think it's a prudent move, because we will spend that type of money. As a matter of fact, and I shared this with the board, that 270 in a normal year is probably light, and it could be light by 30 grand.
Scott, this is Schuyler. I noticed that there's a difference of almost over 94,000 between 2018 actual and 2019 actual. Were you up at the level of that in terms of going forward into FY22? I mean, 219 was 2019 was 295.
In my opinion, 200. Yeah. So if I could explain, in 2019 it was the old rate, and we had, I think, 2 or 3 more or less longer term substitute situations that we had maternity leaves to contend with. Okay. So, but then again, we're talking about, a year in which historically March, April, May, and June are our busiest in terms of teacher subs. That's where we spend at least half of our dollars. And we still spent 154. And that was still with majority of that was old rate. So now we're in this new rate. So, you know, I think 270 is the sweet spot, you know, on this number. And that's just, I mean, obviously I respect the motioner and the seconder's assessment. I just think this is one that we're probably gonna hit that 270 under normal circumstances, no problem. Jared, you can add if you want.
Yeah, substitutes is always a tricky line because they're really the people that we have to call on to bring in. You know, looking at 2020, I mentioned during the school board meetings, I don't want to say that's a throwaway year, but that's when the pandemic hit and really it all fell apart from a budgeting perspective. We were doing a lot of changing around. Looking at a flat spend as projected and proposed with this amendment, I don't think is a good thing to do because we do a lot of spend at the end of the year or within really, you know, the March timeframe forward. So I could get on board with it if we had a forecast of what we have spent traditionally over the past couple of years, but I just know from a substitute standpoint, that's always something that sometimes might not even be enough, like it was in 2019, and we had to transfer money. This would not be an area where I try to do an initial cut, so at least cuts of this size.
Jared, this is Skylar. What do you remember what 2019 budgeted was? The actual was 295. Well, what was budgeted? Because you said you had to move money at that time.
Yeah, I don't have that that number off the top of my head.
So it was obviously lower.
Yeah, it was lower.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great. Scott, I think with this discussion, we get into something for some of our newer members just on the budgeting cycle. On the town side, we're January to December, so that's a little bit easier to follow. On the school side, you're within the school year. So when we're looking at 2020 actuals, correct me if I'm wrong, Scott, but that's what would have ended in June.
Correct.
And then 2021 is the budget that we're currently in and that the committee worked on last year. And then 22 is going to be the school year that starts next September.
Right.
And goes through then.
As Jared said, 2020, I'm not saying it's, you know, we can use the term throwaway year. 2021 is going to be tough too. So it's going to be very challenging for folks like yourself to like look at these actuals because it's just weird, super weird circumstances. You'll see other lines where we'll be overexpended.
I mean, if I can just add one more thing, Cole.
Yep.
With everything in this budget, we need to recognize also that it's a bottom line budget. So not saying that it would go over, but in this case, if they're talking about, you know, cutting it by, you know, Jared was talking about cutting it like a little bit or not by this much, but this is a bottom line budget. So at the end of the day, the school board does have the power to move just in case. But I think by and large, starting at a more reasonable number is something that we should probably do.
All right, further discussion? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to a vote. I assume sometimes we do hands up, but I'm just going to do roll call.
Yeah, Cole, you have to do a roll call
for virtual.
Yeah.
All right. So starting from the top, Skylar.
I'm against that motion.
Yeah. Sorry, should have explained. So just yes or no, or
abstain. Sure, no.
All right. Bill Cordis, not on. Greg.
No.
Joe.
Yes.
Adeline, I did not see come on. Jeff O'Brien.
No.
Fred Platt. Fred there.
Fred, you're on mute.
I tried to use the space bar. It didn't work. No.
Dennis. I vote no. Richard Manzo,
Yes.
Spencer did not. Richard Fletcher,
No.
Selectman Lemay.
No,
On Richard Scott, did Richard Fletcher call in?
He did not.
All right, I see a
Oh.
little microphone thing. I'm not sure how to unmute there, but we'll have to move on.
Can the council hear me?
Hello, who's on the line?
Hi, this is Shiloh Hillman.
I'm sorry, but I
Yeah,
have to, you're not a member of the committee, so I'm gonna have to mute you.
No, that's fine. It's on the Facebook. It's on the bottom. If you'd like to join, type all this in.
Yeah, that's fine. I just have to mute you. You can listen in, but it's my apologies.
Oh, no, that's fine.
Okay,
All right.
thanks for joining us.
Sure.
Thank you.
No, you're,
All right, so we have 2 yes and 7 no, so the motion fails.
Sorry about that, folks.
I move to cut the line by 20,000.
All right, do we have a second?
A second.
All right, promotion from Fred, second from Joe to cut same line we were talking about, teacher sub salaries to 250,000. Is that correct, Fred?
That is correct.
All right, discussion.
I just think that's a more reasonable cut. I think some argument for cutting, given the uncertain circumstances going forward.
Thank you. Further comments from anyone before we move to a vote? Oh, all right. Hearing none, I'll move down. Skylar,
I'll agree to that.
that's a yes.
Yes, that's a yes.
Bill, I do not have on. Greg,
yes,
Joe,
Yes.
Eileen is still not on. Jeff, Jeff O'Brien,
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry, I was having some computer difficulties. What's the
all good.
motion?
The motion is to cut the sub salaries line down to 250K.
Yes.
Fred,
Yes.
Jeff, if you wouldn't mind going back on mute. Thank you. Dennis, I do not see on. I'll vote yes. Spencer, I do not see on. Richard Manzo,
Yes.
Richard Fletcher, Jared Talbot,
Jared,
Jared.
you're on mute.
I was mute. Sorry about that. Yes.
Selectman Lemay.
yes.
All right, we're unanimous. Motion passes.
Hey, Cole,
Yep.
in the interest of time, in the interest of some of these numbers here that are uncontrollable to us, I would like to basically go to, from the line we were at, which was number 10. The health insurance, life insurance, disability, FICA, those are all things that are out of our control. Can we pick up this debate at line number, look here, line number 37? I don't know if you guys would be in agreement with that. I mean,
On page 2. Did anyone else have anything on the first page? I think that's the only thing. All right, we'll move on to page 2. And I'd pick up around the line that Mark had mentioned.
That was line 37, Cole.
Great. So if anyone has any questions about lines on page 2, chime in.
I got a question on line number 52 for Scott or whoever could answer the question.
Yep, go for it.
Line 52 is non-capital software. The jump in the price, is that because we're adding significantly more computers to our system? Or is that for system upgrades for the school department? I don't know if that would be Scott or whoever could answer that question.
Jared, do you want me to take it or do you want to do it? You're on mute.
Go ahead.
All right. So as a result of COVID-19, and we've had to dramatically increase our use of computers,
Correct.
and with that, we've had to have corresponding software purchases. You just can't buy a computer. You have to buy the corresponding software and the licenses. With remote learning, we've added software for the staff. So one of them is to address plagiarism. So all of the papers that get submitted are put through a plagiarism checker. I look at Joe because Joe and I just graduated from UNH, and you remember they had that fun thing there. You didn't put the right quotes, you get tagged for it. We've put in electronic signatures, a whole slew of just software in order to support this this remote learning, which we believe is going to continue well into the future. So that's the impetus for that. I can I think Jared, in terms of the notes piece, to try to give you some sort of an indication as to kind of what we're talking about. So we have added, as I said before, plagiarism detection software. We've added more security. So part of, there was a House Bill 1612 that passed last year. I'm sorry, the year before last. So we have to have much greater firewall type protections. That's in there. We have an online learning management system for elementary school called Seesaw. That was $6,500. And again, a lot of this is, software in terms of MS Office, Windows, those related expenses. So rather than seeing this in each and every school, you're seeing this across the district to support, all of the online learning that's going on.
Great answer, Scott. I appreciate that. Thank you very
Okay.
much. I'm all set. Thank you, Cole.
Not a problem. Further questions on page 2?
Yes, Fred Platt, I assume the same applies to line 56, a huge jump for 2020 is because of the computer requirement for.
Yeah, that's a great point, Fred. So that is, we had to, our servers were not able to handle all of the traffic that was on them, Fred. So we basically had to upgrade 2 sets of servers in order just to deal with it. So as soon as we started this, we knew that we were just not in a good position. Then our backup server failed. So we had to do what was called a server virtualization project. It was in our CIP over 3 years. And we pretty much had to throw $100,000 at it immediately just to run our systems. And that's why it's 188 in that particular year.
Yeah, we had students and teachers that were getting frozen out of the system because they're just getting a denial of service. So that's why you saw that jump there.
So this is Skylar, Jared. So the upgrades appeared to be necessary, huh? At that point.
Yeah, well, it was one of those things that we had planned to do over time, but
Okay.
because of what occurred, we had to basically accelerate that whole program into a few months.
Okay, gotcha. Thanks.
And Skylar, can you look at the line above that? I'm going to point to it right here.
Sure.
So in our current budget, we had $55,000 for server virtualization phase 1. All right.
Okay,
You would have seen it 55,000 in this year and 55,000 in next year's budget, but we did $110,000 worth right in this line here because we had to. We had no choice,
right.
or else we would have been done. So that's why this number went from 55 to 0.
Thanks, Scott.
Okay.
Appreciate that.
Further questions on page 2 here? Hearing none, we'll move on.
Page 3, line 62. The huge jump for 2020, is that because it was coming from the schools into the district line?
Can you said line 62, you said?
Yeah, it's page 3.
I'm on page 3.
That third line down, Scott, you had the teacher's salary moving from 64,000 to 163,000 for the 2019s and 2020. Why did we have such a specific jump there? Were we moving salaries from the schools into the district lines?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yes. Yeah, and see what happens here. This is a great example of what you have something that was, say, a contracted service. I'll use, so you have speech, special education that's being done by a contracted service provider, a vendor, and it should be done by someone in-house. And there's a lot of volatility in our special ed lines. And I'll give you a good example, and Jared knows this. We had 5 or 6 special ed positions involving things like speech, special ed educators, behavioral support people. We can't find them this year. And because of that, we have to use vendors. So we're doing salary transfers. So we're doing transfers out of these lines into a contracted services line. So when you see an actual here, it more than likely means that we were not able to find somebody for special ed and we had to use a vendor. All right. So we spent, and you'll see this when we get to a 339 line. Let me see if I go one more page. You see how this line here is rather volatile? Okay, this is our contracted services line. And in the year in question, you're talking, this is the line that we pay all of our vendors. So even though we're budgeting, let's say 400,000, we spent 522, we spent 369, we spent 592, because whenever we can't find a teacher or a speech pathologist, we have to transfer monies into these lines.
Whole question for Scott.
Yeah.
Scott, so these special ed teachers, we don't keep them on our staff for the school system year round. We kind of hire them as we need them and let them go, or
no, they are part of our regular staff. They're year round. But what I'm saying, Mark, is let's say that we have this is not a good example as a district employee, but if we have let's say 1 or 2 people in that line, if one of them moves on, or they're no longer a district employee, which means they're floating between schools and now they're dedicated to a particular school, or so what happens is then we're trying to fill that position and we can't fill it.
okay.
Then we can't fill it. So now, and this happened again, we've got 5 or 6 right now where this is the case, where we're transferring, monies from speech to contracted services, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the issue. I think this one here is our behavioral specialist folks, and those are the ones where they're hard to find. So then if you're lucky and you get one, we hire them. But if this was a tough year due to COVID and we couldn't hire them, so then you have to go elsewhere. You have to use a vendor.
Thank you.
This particular line, though, this is for professionals that we have on staff that aren't dedicated to one school but go to multiple schools.
That's correct. Yep.
Okay.
So that's just one of those situations again where we talk about, we've taken it, the high school or one of the elementary schools would have absorbed this full line, but we felt it was better at the district line because they're going through multiple schools.
I think though that Fred, your question is a really good one. It illustrates, for someone like myself who's been involved with town and school, there's so much volatility in terms of staffing that are, people coming and going from one school to another, and it's I find it, it's challenging in that respect to look at actuals because the staffing changes. People move from building to building. They quit. You bring on somebody new. Sometimes they're less expensive. Sometimes they're more expensive in terms of their educational, where they're coming in on a step. So it's complicated. That's really all I can say.
All right, further questions on page 3? Hearing none, we'll move on to page 4.
Well, I had a question, if I could, in general, not specific to that page.
Yep.
But being new to this, can you explain to me what the base is, compared to 2021 budget, fiscal year 22 base, and then requested? I'm confused.
Sure.
What the base is.
Yep, Scott.
I apologize, Greg. So the base is your default budget. And essentially that is the budget that should the warrant article fail, this would be the fallback type budget. It includes your current year's appropriation. So it would include your 2021 budget plus or minus any one-time expenditures. And then if you have any, like I said, you're going back to your contractual type obligation. So any collective bargaining agreements. So if you voted for a teacher contract or a support staff contract, a 3-year deal, those would be built into the default.
No,
And then the new is everything above that. Okay?
Yes, thank you.
Great. So we're on page 4. Folks have questions? Hearing none, we'll move on to page 5. And just for newer members also, just because we move on doesn't mean anything is set in stone here. If we need to come back, we can. But to get through it as much as possible here, we'll keep going. So page 5.
Cole, line 125, which is secretary salaries. Did we increase the number of secretaries or is it just raises?
You talk line 125. In this particular case,
We're actually going down.
we went down, Mark.
Oh, all right. Okay, my mistake. I had the lines mixed up, Scott.
Yeah, no, not a problem.
I'm sorry. Yep.
Scott, why are we going down?
It's a different person in the role, and they came in at a lesser level.
At a newer.
Yeah.
Great.
Hey, Scott, this is Jeff. Line 127 on stipends.
Yes.
Can you explain the considerable jump in expenses from 2020 actuals?
This one, Jeff, is your co-curricular stipends. So this is where you would be paying your coaches for athletics, your advisors. That's that entire line. One of the reasons why in 2020 you see the lower actuals, which is here, is because we didn't have spring sports or any co-curriculars, so we didn't pay the coaches. But this also is, the stipends are part of the teacher's contract. So that's why it's more or less a default item, because it's in that contract. It says that, what they're, so let's just say their coach, makes $2,000 in 1 year. The contract says that they would get a 3% increase or whatever in the subsequent year. So that's why it represents all of those things.
And one thing to note about this is the stipends aren't just coaches, but they also for, theater and all the coaching work that's done. So it's not just coaches for athletics, it's also coaching for chess club, theater, music, all of those different pieces.
Yep, student council, debate club, all those things.
So you're telling me that in the teacher's contract, all of those stipends that are actually not tied to, say, the kind of teachers union contract are also wrapped up into that as well?
What I'm saying, Jeff, is that as an addendum to the teacher's contract, it's stipulated what these stipends are. So if you're a basketball coach, you're getting X amount of dollars. And again, as Jared mentioned, it's not just those, it's the folks who do, drama club and the yearbook advisor and all that other stuff.
All right, thank you for the clarification.
I have a question, if that's okay. Maybe we can just have a broader discussion. But my question's directed towards Jared. I guess I'm wondering, because I'm looking at the district salaries increase. I'm looking at later in the budget, all the principals, assistant principals, superintendent, all of these salary lines are increasing by 3.5% year over year. And I guess my question is, and maybe that's a conversation that we as a committee need to have, is why are we increasing everyone's salary by 3.5%? Well, there's some people that don't have jobs and some people that are in the private sector are not getting the increase that the public schools are getting.
I have no problem answering that question. So for the non-union positions, they still have to go through, some raises. We project raises in there because, if we didn't do that, then they might become union positions. So as we look at this, what's the correct term? Our collectively bargained groups have roughly a 3.55 year over year average that is occurring. So even our administrators aren't matching what we have for our faculty and staff that have been approved by the taxpayers. But the overall number that we've used is 3.5%.
And Jared, just for clarification, the number that you gave out on average, that is for folks that are on the grid. So a lot of these grids are like 15, 16 steps. Once you're, beyond that, you don't get a what's called a step adjustment. You move along the grid, but you get a longevity, but you no longer get a grid adjustment. So for those people, it's less than 3.5%. It would be more like 2% or less. The other, if I may, Joe, our HR director also does what's called benchmarking to try to make sure that we're competitive in terms of our pay for administrators and folks like IT, et cetera. And I think if you look at the per pupil costs and what we pay folks, we're pretty much spot on in the middle. I don't think you just try to remain competitive, bottom line.
Further discussion on page 5? All right, hearing none, we'll move on.
Explain 172, general supplies, nothing, then 68,807, then nothing.
Yeah, Fred, line, again, that's COVID right here. So 2130 is your health line, is your health function. So all of this is your PPE that we had to buy.
Okay.
Okay.
How is our stock for PPE, Scott, if the pandemic virus continues to escalate? Will we have enough? Or
Man,
we have to go look?
You're
look
giving me the
more?
softball question, Mark.
I
So
know, sorry.
I forgot to say this from the outset. We did not budget for PPE in FY22 with the thought process that we would be through this thing. We could very well be wrong, a bad guess,
Yeah.
bad estimate, which maybe it's bad, but we also just got some additional funding from the state, from Governor Sununu. I think so. We're going to try to manage that pot of money so that if we do need PPE going into next year, we'll use those funds to do that.
Because that's what I was going to just say. You
Yeah.
basically took the wind out of my sail as the governor the other day made an announcement that he had money for schools.
Yeah.
And I didn't know if we had gone digging into that pot yet.
Not,
And if it
not
was available, might that be something we're looking for?
yeah, not yet, but I think we're going to reserve it for that reason.
Okay,
Yeah.
I understand and I agree with you, but wouldn't we rather go sooner than later because there are other schools that are there? If they get all the money
Yeah,
before us and we have no money left, where will we stand?
we this is good news for us because we're getting that allocation automatically. Every school district is. It's based upon enrollment data.
Okay,
So we're going to get a deposit. I think it's over $400,000 in the next month
great.
to deal
Good
with
news.
COVID related expenses. And again, I don't want to like overstate this too much, but we had close to $200,000 of COVID related expenses that we thought that we were going to get money back from FEMA, and we didn't. And one of the nice things was that the governor, working with our legislature and the Senate, they decided to use some of that gopher money. So right off the bat, we've already spent 200 out of the 440. And then, the thought process is that we would reserve a lot of that money for perhaps future PPE, or if we have more computer needs or IT needs, we might use it there. But a lot of that money is already, I'd say more than half that money is already accounted for.
Thank you.
All right.
Great, Scott. That's excellent.
Any other questions or comments on page 6 here? Hearing none, we'll move on. Page 7.
There's most of the stuff here we can't touch.
Yeah, that's all stuff like that was on the first page. It's dental insurance. We have no control over that, and retirement stuff. We have no control over that as well.
I think.
Mr. Chair, I would
yeah.
like to make a motion. This
Are
is
you
Richard
looking at
Manzo.
Are you looking at the school board stipends, Richard?
Yes, I am. I would like to cut that line by $26,063 to $0.
Is there a second?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Motion from Richard Manzo, second from Joe. Richard, if you'd like to talk about your motion.
Absolutely. Once again, we are in a time of shared sacrifice, and I don't believe that the school board members should be getting paid from a budget where we need to be looking ahead to the possibility of needing to move money around for COVID-related reasons. And secondly, I don't believe that it's ethical for a board to be getting paid by a budget it has a hand in creating.
Joe?
Yeah, and
Would
if
like
I could
to
just
speak?
add to that,
Yeah.
in the New Hampshire Constitution, as a state rep, I make $100 a year plus mileage. And that's about 25 to 30 hours a week that I spend at the State House serving my constituents. So I would just argue that I think the school board does great work. and I really appreciate the work they do. But I think we also need to look at that we're servants of the people, and I don't think taxpayers should be funding it. That's it.
All right, further discussion?
Wondering how many school board members there are, and, historically, before 2018, has that traditionally been what the town does? And, do other towns, tend to compensate their school board members with a stipend?
So I can respond.
Scott.
A stipend to their boards of selectmen or select board members. Typically, you don't see stipends for planning board or budget committee, although there are a handful that do. This came up, last year, as well. There are 9 school board members, so you're aware, and the chair does get. I'm trying to remember, and I probably should know it, like what those amounts are, but the chair does get more than the other members simply because they have a much greater responsibility than the average school board member in terms of setting agendas, meeting with the superintendent, being the person for official duties, those types of things. The last couple of years, that stipend has not been raised. It's been flat. There was a period where it was like, kind of automatically it went up in conjunction with, I think, teacher pay or something like that. But that has since stopped, I think, the last 3 years. Having been a board member on both sides, I would say that, a lot of work goes into being on a school board and being on a select board, and the stipend is not something, I don't think people do it for that per se, but it does help to pay for the meals and the gas and the other expenses that one has. I can't speak to whether or not it's a incentive or disincentive, but I will say that I remember one year, and I think it was when I was on the select board, I think I calculated my pay to like $3 an hour or $2.50 an hour based upon all the time that I put in. So that's not to diminish what our state reps do or anybody else who serves in a public capacity that gets paid less, but it's just something that has been historically there for members as a means to remunerate them for a lot of hours that they contribute.
Scott, this is Skylar. So there's historical precedence for this.
Oh yes. Oh yeah. This has been going on for. The
Okay.
school board has been getting a stipend for decades, as well as the Board of Selectmen.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Not anything new.
Further discussion? All right, seeing none, the motion is to decrease the school board stipends to 0. And that's reference number 203. Last chance. All right, I'll call the roll. Skylar,
That's no.
Bill Cordis is not on. Greg,
No,
Joe,
Yes.
Eileen is not on. Jeff,
Abstain.
Fred,
Yes.
Dennis, not on. I vote no. Spencer is not on. Richard Manzo,
Yes.
Richard Fletcher,
No.
Jared,
I've been instructed by my board to vote no.
Selectman Lemay.
No.
All right, our count is 3-6 with 1 abstention. So the motion fails.
And by the way, if I snooze at the wheel here in terms of not sharing my screen, just let me know, please.
Oh, good. Further questions, comments on page 7?
Most of it's out of our control.
All right. Moving on to page 8.
Most of it's out of our control.
I'll take a quick glance here for everyone.
I concur. This is small.
Last chance for page 8. Moving on to page 9.
Line 254,
Great. What's your question, Fred?
pretty big jumps. Why?
Fred, this is your SAU management. The jump went from 1,796,403 to 1.8. I don't know if that's now from here to from 19 to 20. The reason why this was a jump was because there was one position, I think it was the facilities director, used to be Goffstown only. And that now the facilities director is for the SAU, meaning that Mr. Loring does work for both Goffstown and New Boston. And that's why, and keep in mind that about 22% of the SAU budget is paid for by New Boston. So that's why it went up from 19 to 20. And then this year, it went up about 11,000 or so.
Any other questions on page 9 here? Hearing none, we'll move on to page 10. Questions on page 10? All right. Hearing none, we'll move on to page 11. All right. Anything on page 11, folks? All right, we'll move on to 12. Anything here, folks?
Sorry, I went too much.
Okay.
Yes, Scott, just if you could, that top line.
Yeah.
I think some people are gonna have a heartburn about this one.
Yeah.
Could you articulate exactly what's going on, not only with our school district, but all school districts with student transportation?
All right, so again, you have two transportation lines that are massive. So the first one is function 2721. That is your regular ed transportation line. And what happened is that not last year, the year prior to that, so it started this July, was that kindergarten transportation became mandatory. And what we have is a half-day program. So in essence, we now have to provide midday transportation to our kindergarten school, Glen Lake School. Whereas in the past, kindergartners would get on the school bus with all the other kids in the morning, and then they would have to get picked up by their guardians or parents, or take a bus to the Y or a childcare facility. Same thing for those who had afternoon kindergarten, they would have to get dropped off, and then they'd ride the school bus home. Now we have to provide public transportation on the bus. And again, another unfunded mandate, Joe and Fred. So the law passed, and this is going to be about a $68,000 hit. So this is 4 school buses. We typically run 22, 23 school buses, but we don't need that to run that many just for those amount of kids. So we're gonna break it up into 4 quadrants of Goffstown, and so we need 4 buses for that midday transportation. So that's one of the primary drivers on that one. The second one is reference line number 322. So the FY21 budget that's my boo-boo. So it really should have been about $775,000. When I entered into the budget, I didn't click a button that would add up all of the expenses, and we were under budget. So these are all the court mandated transportation. So we have out of district students that are either court mandated or due to their special needs, they have to get their education at other schools, whether that be in New Hampshire or in Massachusetts. And so this is something that is also mandated by law as part of their educational plan. And in this case, it comprises both based on need and also by court placement. So we don't have any real say in line number 2722 in that respect.
Right. Line 321, that mandate was by the state of New Hampshire?
That was, yeah, I don't know if you were in the legislature 2 years ago, but that's what they passed a law that stated that you must provide kindergarten transportation. Well, no big deal if you have full day kindergarten, right? But they didn't take into account, there's less than I think less than a dozen, Fred, that don't have full day kindergarten. So now we got pinched on that because now we have to provide the wraparound in terms of the midday piece.
Well, I became a legislator 2 years ago. So did Joe, and so did Cole Real.
Yeah. We can blame Cole too.
Yeah.
Yes.
Question for Scott.
That bus transportation is a negotiated contract?
Yes.
So when we didn't run the buses back the first part of the year, did we still have to pay for them?
We got a good sized discount. So in March, I think we got about a 20% discount. And then in April, May, and June, it ranged from 30 to 50% off. So we didn't pay.
Good.
And then the same thing on the special ed side was a little bit different, but on the regular ed side, we were able to save a little bit of money there, as you can see in the actuals.
Yep.
It's I don't want to harp on this too much because I don't know what's going to happen into the future, but we have it's a partnership with the truck center in the sense that we have to be careful and not cut our nose to spite our face, because if we say we're not paying you a penny, and then there's no bus drivers, or they go bankrupt, it's not like there's a ton of bus companies around. So we have to be careful there. So we negotiated it.
And we actually did better from a negotiation standpoint for earlier this year and last year than other school districts did. So
yeah,
Scott, the administration should definitely get some kudos for that. But not when it comes to budgeting for next year.
What happens when the fuel prices change and vary so much as they have recently? Do we get a stipend back, or do we have to pay for whatever the going price is at the time the contract is signed?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Dick. So in line 321, as part of that budget, our contract assumes a price of $1.50 a gallon for gasoline. And then we have what's called a fuel escalator or a fuel surcharge. So based upon the price of gasoline, and keep in mind that we get gas at a lower rate because we're a government entity. In times when gas prices are relatively low, we might, I think we allocate of that amount, I think it's about $50,000 roughly towards that fuel escalator. So if prices are low, we won't be dipping into it. But if prices jump back up, then obviously you do pay. So they monitor the gas prices, Dick, and then it's part of our bill. It's a shore up at the end of the year.
All right. Further discussion on 12? Hearing none, we'll move on. 13.
So, Mr. Chair, right now,
Yep.
just so you know, we're in location 101. That's Bartlett Elementary School. So everything that you see that's going to be in the next few pages will all be pertaining to Bartlett.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Scott.
Bartlett, which, if I'm remembering correctly, is celebrating its 100th year.
100.
Certain parts of the building.
And it looks it.
Yep.
That's good go.
Good point.
All right, page 13 here.
Scott, line 366, equipment rental. It's like that's been not present the past couple years, and then we see a $36,545.
Now hold tight. Let me check that.
Yeah, that's listed as a managed print toner, as well as a laptop lease and copier maintenance agreement for that school. So this is some of the infrastructure.
Print service.
Yeah.
What was
Yeah, I
done
remember
previous.
that was a discussion topic, moving to a managed print service instead of managing all the toner and paper supplies yourselves.
Correct.
Further questions here? Hearing none, we'll move on to 14. Questions on 14? All right, hearing none. Move on to 15. Questions or comments on 15? Hearing none, we'll move on. 16. Hearing none. 17. Anything on 17? Move on to 18. Any questions there?
So Scott, just just want to make sure I look at this line for page 18. I am looking at line 496, which is the teacher's salary. So it looks like we actually dropped this by 15,000. Is this because we transferred something over to a different district line?
No, it's because your person who left that position was replaced, and that person was, you know, they were replaced with a less expensive teacher or a media person. It's a media role. So we had a retirement, Jared, and that's why that's the case.
So this is a time when natural attrition is allowing us to reduce our budgets because we're bringing in
right. And I think
experienced individuals.
And I think this illustrates, you know, a good point is that, you know, our job is to kind of call balls and strikes here. I mean, this is a case where it went down because we had somebody who left. They were at the high end of the pay scale, and now we brought somebody in at a much lower rate, you know, and so that becomes so because we know who we have in that role. Now they become part of the default. We don't roll this 75,894 into the default. It's who's in the job now, and that's what we roll. So I just wanted to clarify that too. Good point.
Further questions on 18? Hearing none, move on to 19. Questions or comments on 19? All right. Hearing none. Move on to 20.
Yes.
Yep, Fred, go.
Custodial salaries, line 553. I see the cut 2020, that's COVID related, I presume. Because, is that right?
So line 553.
Yeah, custodial salaries.
I think in this, you talk about when you say cut, what do you mean by cut? Because we're going from 78, 429 up to 80.
It went from 66,403 to 59,511 in 2020.
Right, because when school was closed, we moved people around, and that's yeah.
Now you're back up.
Now you're back.
Right.
I'm sure it had a logical explanation. I just wanted to hear it.
Yeah.
Scott, didn't they also adjust some of the schedules for the maintenance staff that come in at different times of the day?
Yep.
Okay.
So we adjusted, we adjusted, we had to move people all around into different buildings. We're still doing that, as a matter of fact. So we're moving our custodians in between buildings to fill in gaps, and also to try to do more intense cleaning. Some people who were working nights are now doing some more day work, and it's just been a lot of moving parts to make sure that the schools are getting cleaned at a heightened regimen.
Thank you, Scott.
Other questions on 20? Hearing none, we'll move on to 21. Just a few lines there. Any questions there? All right, hearing none, that's what I had as our stopping point for the evening, and that gets about a third of the way through it. And I think that's pretty good progress for this meeting. Was there anything anyone wanted to go back to or questions that folks had?
I'm not sure if this was covered, but I had just one question. Maybe Scott, you have some deeper insight in why there was such a steep increase in the retirement this year.
So here's what they shared with us. So the New Hampshire retirement system, their actuaries take a look at their investments over different time horizons to make sure that they're funding, certain the pension liabilities. And despite the fact that we've had pretty robust market gains over the last, I'd say 2-3 years, they felt that they needed to increase, the contribution to add more to the pension fund. And I don't know a ton about it, Jeff. I did speak to our HR director, Kate McGrath, and she told me that, she was really surprised because usually they give you a little bit more of advanced warning, like a year or so that you can kind of plan. And this was, and Mark knows this as a select board member, is like, bam. I mean, I think we got this in September, literally a week or two before we were doing the budget, which kind of came out of the blue. And Mark, I don't want to put you on the spot, but did you guys know about it on your end? Like this was even remotely coming?
No, we were waiting to hear the answer from the New Hampshire State Retirement Board, and when we get it, it's going to be a shock. But like you said, they look at everything at the entire picture, and they set their number. Some years it goes up, some years it stays the same, but this year it went up significantly.
I don't know the precise numbers, but there's been a fairly healthy assumption in the past about investment returns up in the 8% range. And you cut that to more like 5 or 6%, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
And therefore the contribution has to go up to make up for it. And frankly, 8% to me is unsustainable.
And I know the fire department pays a different rate than the school department, and then the school department pays a different rate than the police department. There are 3 different retirement systems, and they all put a different contribution into it. And right now, I believe the fire department is the highest contributing part for the retirement system.
And that's because you're more grossly underfunded than some of the others.
Could be. I'm not 100% sure on that one.
And I know we're digressing a little bit, Jeff, but just for the sake of the budget committee members overall, when you compare town versus school, Mark is correct. You have your group 1 police and fire, and your police and fire do not pay into Social Security, nor does the town pay into Social Security. So factor that in. A lot of people will be like, oh my goodness, but they don't pay FICA and they don't get FICA. So just important to know.
I think the fire's up around 30% this year.
Over that now. I think it's Mark, what, 34, 35%?
34%, I believe.
Yeah, 34, Mark said.
It's unfortunate we don't sit all at the same level, at the same rate. There has been discussion in years past, but nothing was ever done about it. So.
All righty. Anything else, folks? If not, oh, yep.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, this is Jared. I just want to make sure. So we're going to be continuing these meetings on Thursdays as we move forward till we're completely done. I just want to make sure that we're not looking to do Tuesdays and Thursdays for the school, and that is your vision for this year.
Correct. We'll stick on Thursdays here.
Okay.
I have another question, Cole.
Yep.
Are we, I haven't read deep into the schedule. Are we meeting Tuesday on election day, or are we waiting till next Tuesday?
We are not meeting.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So next meeting will be next Thursday. And Scott, I believe the link is the same Will it be the same link for
Yeah,
folks?
it's the same link. I set it up as a recurring appointment. If you accepted it, we're not meeting on Thanksgiving. You can't not, take one out. So, I think in speaking with Cole, I think the goal for the school side would be to be done before Thanksgiving. We would love that.
Yeah.
So, that being said, there is one more Thursday beyond Thanksgiving, but we're going at a pretty good pace, it seems like. So I think that goal is attainable.
Yeah, and we'll see where we end up. I appreciate all the discussion tonight. I feel like folks did a good job making their point.
Hold on, Nicole, Richard has a comment or question. Go.
Can I get everybody's email address so I can email them the water precinct budget?
Oh yeah, yep. We'll make that happen for you, Richard.
Who do I get it from? Catherine?
Yeah, Catherine has
Yeah,
it.
Catherine.
You can send it right to Catherine, and then she'll send it to them, to everybody.
Everyone's out to everybody.
Right.
Yeah.
I just thought that if I could get the email addresses, our secretary can send it out.
Yeah, if you just send the water precinct budget directly to Catherine, she'll be able to send it out to the group, and she'll include that whenever she'll include you on that email when she does it, so you know when it went to everyone, if that makes sense, Richard.
And I also want to say, Cole, that I think you guys have my my cell phone number. I put that on there. So if you have any questions between now and Thursday about either what we've covered or what we're about to cover, and you want a more detailed answer, just give me a call. Okay?
Thanks, Scott.
All right.
Awesome. So without further ado, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right. Motion by Richard Manzo, second by Fred Plett. Call the roll. Skylar.
Yes.
Bill Corey's not here. Greg.
Yes.
Joe.
Yes.
Eileen is not here. Jeff O'Brien.
Yes.
Fred.
Yes.
Dennis is not here. I vote yes. Spencer Diaz is not here. Sorry. Richard Manzo.
Yes.
Richard Fletcher.
Yes.
Jared.
Yes.
And Selectman Lemay.
Yes, sir.
All right. We're unanimous. And we are adjourned until next Thursday. If you need help finding the link again, just let myself or Scott know. And we'll get it to you.
What I'll do is I'll resend it like Wednesday. I'll just send it as an update type of thing.
Great.
Okay.
All right. Have a good evening, folks.
All right.
Thank
Thank you.